when the food editor, Donna Lee, retired 12 years ago, nobody wanted her job. We put an ad in newspapers, and we had 3 people apply for her job, all of whom hadn't been in the workforce except as freelance writers. Imagine today what it would be to have a food writer job open to do this. That is how the scene has just exploded. And I do think you can look at Food Network. And just a little fact, those of you who are not from here may not know, is Food Network was started by my newspaper, the Providence Journal. We owned Colony Communications. And people from that group and people here at Johnson & Wales started the Food Network. We sold it to Scripps Howard when we were bought by Belo, and so that was the end of my food TV career. But that is a point of pride for us that I think Providence definitely helped to fuel this. So I would like to ask just each panelist to introduce themselves and just give us a few words on what they do. And then we are going to dive right in. I really want to start right off where we finished last year, which was, what is the future of food tours? It's a great entrepreneurial thing, but there are so many issues of authenticity, who gets paid, and I'm sure this group would have some great things to say. So, Peter, would you start for us?
Certainly. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Lehmeller. I'm the Dean of the College of Culinary Arts here at Johnson & Wales University. I did not start the Food Network. I would have liked to, but they told me I had a face made for radio.
I'm Myra Albertson. I'm the founder and sole operator of Nashwaaks in New York City. So I was very interested in what you had to say. I will also tell you that I had to take a personal day off. I'm actually a teacher, and that's how I support my passion. So I have a full-time job, and I lead food tours.
Hi, I'm Kristen Adamo. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here for the Providence Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau and a former employee here at Johnson & Wales, so a little bit of both. And I lead the marketing effort for the CVB, and one of our top marketing strategies is culinary tourism, and it's something we've been doing for a long time.
My name is Sam Poley. I'm the Director of Public Relations and Communications for the Durham Convention and Visitors Bureau in Durham, North Carolina. Retired chef and restaurant owner, and came back to the Bureau. I had been there once before, and we do what she does, except we do it much to the south.
My name is Jeremy Mitchell. I'm the founder and president of a company called Food Connect Media that operates EasyTix event ticketing. We're a full-service ticket agent that works exclusively with food and wine events, tours, and festivals around the world. Some of the tour operators here use our services already, and we work almost exclusively with culinary tours all over the world.
I think everybody saw me earlier, but if you didn't, I'm Shane Costa, and I own Chicago Food Planet Food Tours and Food Tour Pros.
Thank you. So when Seth and I talk about this panel, and we talked about what he sees as food tourism, he said he sees a couple of branches, and one branch is what Myra, you started in 1983, dipped your foot into food tourism.
I started kind of by accident. I had failed my driver's test in New York City several times, and I started to ride a bike. And I started to use my bike to visit neighborhoods, and I was meeting, it was just the beginning of the bicycle movement in New York. I don't want to go too long. To make a long story short, 3 of us got together and we formed an outfit called Hungry Peddlers Gourmet Bicycle Tours, but probably the gourmet didn't belong. But we were going all over the 5 boroughs of the city. We did have one Staten Island tour looking, in search of food. So we were 83 to 1990, and then our lives went in different directions, and then I resumed at doing walking tours in 2000. So I'm finishing my 15th season as leader of Nashwaaks.
I think that is just amazing to have that longevity. So that's one branch, are people who do food tours. And then the other branch are people like Kristen and Sam, who what they do is they use food to draw people to the cities that they are representing. So Sam, Kristen, whichever one of you wants to start, just tell us a little bit about how you do this.
So in Durham, we like to say that food is part of our DNA. Durham has earned quite a number of food accolades, and it's tied to a variety of factors given, the tight urban core in a rural county, with lots of rural pasture, let's put it that way. We have an incredible population of people who are well-educated, who are high earners, and with a huge international flair. So what we did is we created this baseline, essentially, unintentionally, of a supplier network, if you will. And over time, people started to hear about that. So now, if you ask people, where the best food in North Carolina is, it's a pretty healthy argument between us and Asheville, who also has an excellent food scene. Durham is a little easier to get to. We have an international airport 11 minutes from downtown. Asheville's a little bit harder to get a hold of. But if you look at Durham's base product, and Seth and I talked about this on the Taste Truckers podcast when he was talking about how difficult it was to get the food scene corralled to do things. In Durham, we sort of have the opposite problem. If we whisper something to the wind that somebody needs to occur, needs to happen, all of a sudden we've got 8 factions working on it. And sometimes they're sort of bumping into each other and competing. But we're really, really lucky in that we've got all the basic pieces and components, and the opportunity fed itself. So now for visitors, all we need to do is say, oh, look, you're interested in food? Point your attention here briefly, and people are pretty well attracted to it. So it was more a matter of us showcasing what was there organically, and then finding ways to sort of siphon out just the food channel of interest. And we've been really, really fortunate to have a huge uptick in visitation in Durham.
So you built it, and then they came.
It was there, we highlighted it, and now they flock.
I got
it. So when I started with the CVB in 2005, the first thing that my new boss did was hand me a piece of research, and it showed where Providence placed regionally for being a food and restaurant city, and we were second to last in the region. And I thought, well, that's not so. So what we decided to do is really just shine a light on everything that was already there. We're very fortunate to have Johnston & Wales in this community, and that's really affected our culinary scene. So we have a lot of really talented, smart chefs doing a lot of interesting things in a very small place. We're also fortunate to be on Narragansett Bay, so we have some amazing local products and some local seafood. It's also a place where there's a lot of rich ethnic traditions. We have there's not one ethnic majority in Providence. We have an Asian, Latino, Italian, Portuguese tradition. So what we did was kind of corral all those assets, and then it was just a relentless campaign. To just beat down the doors of newspapers and magazines. And Travel and Leisure does a poll every year, and we really got the community behind voting for Providence, and just kind of would build one thing on top of the other. And then in 2012, we were the #1 food city in the U.S. in the Travel and Leisure poll. We were #2 in 2013. We lost to San Francisco, so you really can't argue that. And after relentless campaigning with Saveur magazine, they named us one of the notable small dining destinations in the world in 2012, and then again in 2013, and added our bar program as well. So it's just been a relentless campaign and a corralling and inventorying of assets to make sure that we're spotlighting all the great things that our city has to offer.
So, Kristen, what you're saying is Mom was right, nagging works.
Oh yeah, I'm shameless. I don't care.
So, Jeremy, tell me, how do you get word out about your business and your tickets? Is it, obviously what these people do are reach the public, reach the media. How do you get your business out there?
We really played a middleman role between operators, festivals, sometimes destination marketing organizations that are looking to put together culinary festivals. we usually, we handle the customer experience typically online, by phone, or on site in a lot of cases with larger festivals, right through the buying process. And a lot of that often involves advising on web sales, web content, making sure that they have properly structured, whether it's a festival or a tour operator, have properly structured online channels that make it easy for their customer. With larger festivals, 90% of sales are happening through the web these days and on mobile devices. And we spend a lot of time advising on the way that the end user is going to be interacting with the business from a purchase standpoint, and how the whole world is shifting to mobile devices and buying their tickets at the last moment, and making sure that your business is accommodating those types of habits, because that's what's happening. One of the neat things for us is because we work in so many different markets with so many different users and across a lot of different food brands, we're lucky enough to see trends that happen regionally. And it's really interesting watching how the habits change dramatically, city to city, country to country, urban to suburban, around the world. But specifically to that, sorry, yeah?
I was going to ask you for some examples of trends, because I'd be curious to know what you've been observing.
Sure. We just finished, so we handle a food festival in Portland, Oregon. I just spent a week in Portland, which is Bon Appetit Magazine's Feast Portland. They sell about 35,000 tickets to this festival. It's in year 3. In the first year, we started working with them 3 years ago. The overwhelming majority of their tickets are sold online, and people show up in a very traditional method with their printed ticket that they show up at the door. This year, we had 90% of the tickets show up on a mobile phone. Nobody had printed out tickets, which has dramatically changed. We also handle a food and wine festival in Houston, Texas, actually about 20 minutes north of Houston, Texas. Similar type of demographic, but almost zero mobile phones. Same process. Literally the sales process from our perspective is identical, but the adoption of technology varies so drastically from area to area and city to city. Food tours also tend to have a purchase decision that's made much closer to the actual tour, depending on the client, versus a food festival tends to have a purchase much farther out. So the mobile aspect of the food tour business seems to be much more important for that type of product, because they're competing with same-day activities, weather issues, people that don't want to commit until they wake up that morning and decide they're in the mood to go tasting food. Food festivals, people tend to make that decision when it goes on sale. But somewhere like New York is going to have a much better mobile adoption, or a much faster mobile adoption, than somebody who's potentially in Providence or in a smaller market, potentially. I would say are probably the biggest things.
Thank you. Now, are you a foodie person or a technical person?
Both my parents are chefs. I grew up, my family owned restaurants, so I definitely grew up in food. And then the tech came later, I suppose.
Yeah. You do not have to scratch very hard at this panel to see that the chef part is just right there.
Yeah, and I probably take more food tours than anybody. I average about one a week in different cities when I'm traveling, so lots.
That's great. Now, Peter, we would love to know what the students here are interested in. Are they all going to be chefs? Do they want to do food tours? What do you see that they are interested in?
Well, certainly they'll never stop being interested in being chefs, because their primary connection is to food. But one of the things that we've noticed in the last number of years is a great expansion in the opportunities in the food economy. So where food is a lever to get to other types of careers, whether it's supply chain management, travel and tourism, gastronomy, they really are using this love of food and the connection with actual touching and production of food, and they're turning this into, I think, in a very entrepreneurial way. They're looking at the market and seeing that the old-fashioned way of joining a corporation or a company and working 30 years, that's just gone. They realize they have to make their own way. So I think students have really become very much involved in spreading and forcing us to challenging us to offer new ways of learning for them to get out there and have successful careers. One of the things that surprised me, I've lived in Rhode Island for about a year, was the extent of the food economy. It was mentioned earlier, how much we produce here, but we don't add a lot of value, and that's a really tremendous thing, and I hope that our students will get involved in entrepreneurial ventures that people stay in Rhode Island. Johnson Wales represents, I think, a real brain gain type institution. So people will come to Johnson Wales for that love of food, and they tend to stay, which is why I hope someday Charlotte, where we have a campus, will be the third city in North Carolina, along with Asheville and Durham. I certainly would not challenge that. Asheville and Durham are the leaders in North Carolina. We've been in Charlotte for about 10 years. I think that we're going to be a third player there.
Peter, what did I read a fun fact about you that you were a private chef in New York?
Yes, I was. I was a personal chef for the governor.
For Governor Cuomo.
Mario Cuomo, not Andrew.
Thank you. Shane, I'd love to start with you on a discussion that really got lively last year that we really wondered about, and different people had different perspectives. If you take people on a tour, they're paying you, you go to their country, you go to their store, do you pay that store owner? Do you pay that farmer? Is this part of what is happening and should happen?
I'm smirking because I know all the people that took our courses here, and there's a few of you who know this answer very well. It's the question I always get whenever I have my preliminary call with somebody that's interested in possibly taking our course. I try to let them know that we're not talking about the content of the course, but they always say, I just want to know one question. Do I pay for the food? Do I pay for the food? Yes, absolutely pay for the food. The reason you want to pay for the food is, I've always used this analogy. The restaurants that we visit on our food tours, can they survive without our business? Yes. Can me, the food tour operator, survive without theirs? No. So who has the upper hand? They do. It's just basic economics. If you walked in, I always imagine somebody that, for example, didn't know that you should pay for the food, walks into a really smart chef or owner and says, listen, in exchange for what we're doing, we're marketing you. So we want the food for free. I would just love to see that chef say, okay, well, let me ask you a question. If I say no and everybody else says no because we don't think that this is good economics, how's that food tour working for you? It's not. So the short answer is yes. We pay for all the food, and one of the things that we actually do at Chicago Food Plant, I think some of the people here do it as well as a result of the Food Tour Pros class, is we'll say in the introduction, we pay for all the food that you'll be tasting. We do not ask for, we do not suggest, nor do we receive any foods for free. Why? Because we're here to support the local economy. We're here to support the local foods because they're supporting our business. We can't live without them, and so we absolutely have to pay.
So, Myra, it looks like you're nodding and you agree with this.
Yeah, I tell people that food tours are not just about food, but they're about small business and they're about real estate. Because in New York, so many of the small businesses are threatened, and they really need support so they can stay in business and stay viable. Because it's a holistic experience. It's not just eating, it's neighborhood. And so, I'm nodding because it's so important. So when people pay for my tour, they know that, a portion of what they're paying isn't going to me. They see me paying for the food because I buy it on site, and then I encourage them, we have time afterward to go shopping. So I say, bring a tote bag, and we have all these great markets to go to.
And I just want to add, one of the things that used to be on our older version of our website, we haven't updated, that page is gone. Chicago Food Plant in the last decade has spent over $1 million on all the foods that all of our customers have bought. And then that's what we're paying out to all the businesses. But that does not include the ancillary, the return customers that are going to these locations after the tour is over. So one of the things that we do when we sell this idea to a vendor is we'll say, you're going to get paid once. Be happy with that. Okay, you're going to get paid from me. But you're also going to get paid twice when those people come back. Whether they do or they don't, I don't control. But that additional revenue, that secondary revenue that's coming beyond what we're paying, just makes it icing on the cake for those vendors.
So, Jeremy, maybe you can weigh in on this if you know if this is part of your business with the ticketing. What is the sweet spot for charging? This has to be an incredible anxiety to come up with an amount that will get you the people to take the tours. You can pay, the businesses, and you can have a living wage too.
I'm going to let pricing go to these two because they're going to know better than I do on
you
pricing.
don't, so your tickets are more for festivals rather than food tours?
No, definitely food tours. But what I will say is that the ability to track and manage the process of paying your vendors as a food tour operator is something that we get requests on all the time. And we, as a result, just finished building a module to be able to track and manage that process. So it's something
so the technical part of it, people are looking for help.
Absolutely. So it is. So, and the majority, from what I know of our clients, certainly do pay their vendors. But we've just finished building software to facilitate that process.
So, Jeremy, is there a range of food tour prices that you can just give us? I mean, I don't care how elaborate or how simple.
I don't know the vendor pricing because we're not involved in that, but just food tour pricing.
Yep.
The U.S. actually has the lowest of any of the countries we work with, but typically 35 to 55, sometimes higher depending on the city. In the Canadian market, the low end is 75, the high end 150. And Europe and internationally, well, Europe 65 to 150 euros, and then Mexico, we have a few clients throughout Mexico that are in the $50 to $125 range.
What do we attribute that to anybody? And anybody who has an answer to that, I would take it. Why are we stingy here?
I ask that question a lot because people will. I think it depends also on the region. I think that people in the Midwest are different than the people in the Northeast. I've always said that when people go to New York City, they're like in la la land. Oh, just throw money here, throw money there. But when people in Chicago, they're very concerned about their budget for their vacation, etc. So, for example, our average price at Chicago Food Plan is $45 a ticket. I think for 3 hours, eating away through the city and getting this incredible historical, architectural, cultural, and then obviously eating as well along the way, I think that's very fair. And then people will go to Europe and they won't bat an eye if they pay 100 euros for a food tour. And I think there is this discrepancy, and I think, again, because a lot of the people that are taking food tours in Chicago, 50% are locals and 50% are tourists. Of that section that are tourists, a majority of them are Midwest tourists. So, if they go to New York City, they're going to say, I'm not paying $75 for a food tour. But they're willing to do it $45, let's say, in Chicago. But then you get somebody from New York City that's on our tour and like, you guys could charge twice as much and I would pay for this. So there is this disconnect. But I will say to you, and you were asking Germany, how... Did I say Germany? Maybe I did. Where and how do people come up with their pricing? I think that actually depends on food costs, what your goal is for profitability, what you're going to pay your staff, et cetera, like that.
Part of it is also that I think people are developing in this country the relationship with food as an artistic and artisan product. We have been trained in this country. If you think back to the food that your grandparents ate, locavore, not a new thing. What came out of the ground, what can I eat now? This is hardly a new concept. We can blame FedEx for the fact that we've forgotten all that. Okay? But let's be clear. I mean, global shipping. I once taught a food class called Ripe Mangoes at the Corner of 80th and 1st in January. Okay, that was the title of the class. We, in this country, have been trained to think that proteins come on styrofoam trays under plastic wrap, that I can get grapes any day of the year, regardless of the weather, and that, food is really a commodity and not anything to be savored. And, I think we could also, without casting too many stones, thank the television industry for that. But the truth is that we're beginning to regain in America, and this is the only country with which I have lots of empirical experience, we're beginning to regain in this country a relationship with food that matters. And food tour operators are delivering people these experiences where they get to go and connect with a chef, not necessarily as a celebrity, and also not as some low-end wage earner. I'm here, when I was a restaurant owner, because my restaurant closed in 2007, we still named every farm that we used. Now when you go to Durham, if they name the farms, it's usually on a blackboard up in the restaurant. Because in Durham, it's a foregone conclusion that it came locally if it could. And that's probably the case here in Providence, because the more experience I get with this really cool town, it feels a lot like Durham. Except yours is a more mature city. So, in
Did you
terms
just
of
call us old?
mature, experienced, sophisticated. Okay. Shall I go on?
No.
Or should I just leave now? But I think to get back to the central point, people in America are more and more willing, and we see it in Durham because, like I said, we're very fortunate. We've got a well-educated population. They're high-wage earners. People will pay in Durham. They don't push back on that. But I think you're going to see that spread from, maybe the Midwest markets or some of these markets that don't have sort of that confluence of all those details, because people are appreciating food as something that is really heavily curated, well cared for, takes a lot of experience to make it well.
I'll just kind of add on that for a second. One of the things that we're seeing across the tourism industry is that notion of experiential travel and experiential education, and I think that's really coming through with food tours, because people don't want to just go and eat an oyster. People want to go down to Matunic Oyster Farms and talk to Perry Razzo and see the oyster, and then learn from one of the chefs, well, how do I cook the oyster, and learn about the ecosystem. And we're seeing more and more of that across the board, also in the group tour market.
So expectations are high, not just for the eating. They want to do it from A to D.
Complete experience, yeah.
Has anybody in this room watched the show Portlandia? Right. How many of you remember the whole scene about Colin the chicken?
Oh, the chicken.
All right. If you don't and you haven't seen this, go to YouTube and search Colin the chicken. Okay? And you'll begin to understand what's happening in other places.
I just wanted to add, several years ago I went to Istanbul, and I went on this wonderful tour called Istanbul Eats. And I paid much more than I would normally pay for a food tour locally, because I think when people go, they're not going to be there again, maybe for years. And it ended up being a 5-hour tour with just 5 people. So it was very intensive, a lot of food, and it was this investment as part of the experience. Whereas in New York or Chicago, and especially like you, I have repeat customers. I have locals, so they don't pay as much because they come with me a lot, and we're going all over the place. The other thing I'd say in New York City, and I don't have anything comparisons. We have a lot of food tour businesses now. I started in 2000. There are a few, but there's just been an explosion, so there's a lot of competition. And one of the things I have been noticing is a lot more of the food tours are offering discounts through Groupon and Living Social and all that stuff. So people are actually starting to lower prices to get customers. I will confess that I tried Groupon a couple years ago. I hated it. People who came on my tours were not really interested in what I had to offer. They just wanted to eat. So I will never do it again, and I'd rather have a small tour of people who are interested in what I have to offer that's unique. So I think that's just something I want to throw out that I've noticed happening.
Myra, let me ask you another question. So how do you grow your business? I think that's probably the next thing.
Yeah.
So you already answered one of my questions, which is we talked about last year, is people don't come a second time on a tour. So for you, they do.
They do, because I have over 36 different tours now, because I'm in all 5 boroughs. This is the quirky thing about my tours. Since I don't need to be very conscious about making a lot of money, I do it my own way. So I would get bored if I was doing the same couple of tours all the time. So people know that they can go to the Bronx with me one weekend and another weekend somewhere out in Queens, and I'm developing new tours all the time. I started something called Dining Out with Nashwalks, so that sometimes we get together to just go out to dinner. I charge a modest fee, but it's a way of creating community. The other thing, to promote the tours and market them, when I started out, I was fairly unique and I got a lot of press. That's harder to get now because of all the blogs and people are going out on their own. So that is affecting it. This is a little plug, but this is actually old. I also had a book published, but this is already almost 12 years old, but I got a lot of publicity for that. Now it's even hard to publish a food book because people are doing stuff online. They're self-publishing. So that has changed. But people find me, they find me.
Shane, do you see a lot of repeats? Is this an issue? I mean, you do the tours, but you started the classes, so you expanded in a whole different way. But for the tours,
Yeah, I was listening. I was thinking a few years ago, my operations director contacted me and said, "You need to take a look." I kind of noticed this woman's name over and over taking tours, and she has just signed up for her 10th tour on the same tour route. And I said, we need to do something. So I went and I met her. I got her some gift certificates and some chocolates and showed up at the beginning of her tour. And I said, thanks for being a great customer. Why the hell have you taken this tour 10 times? I mean, I like it, but... and she said, every single time I take the tour, I bring a different person, a different family member, a different friend, whatever it might be. And then the other way that we've been able to grow and get repeat business is by offering additional products. So if you look at a food tour business, a product would be... You've got a lot of tours, evidently. I only have 4 unique tour routes in Chicago. So if somebody, let's say, takes one of the tours and enjoys it, I kind of have them hooked. One of the reasons I started Food Tour Pros was I kept noticing that people were starting very low value, low quality food tours. And if your first food tour experience is of low value or low quality, you'll never take one again. If your first food tour experience is of high quality and high value, you will take them everywhere you go for the rest of your life. And so if you, let's say, live in Chicago and you have friends visiting you a lot, then you will keep taking my tours, evidently, 10 times. And that's not necessarily common, but I did just read a review the other day on TripAdvisor. The woman had written a nice review about us. I think it was like her 3rd or 4th review, and she said, I've taken the Gold Coast and Old Town tour 3 times, and I just finished taking your Bucktown Wicker Park food tour for the 3rd time. Again, same idea. The reason they're doing it isn't so much because they're taking it by themselves over and over, because that would be weird. They are just bringing other people, and then what we do is we try to expand into additional areas of Chicago, so they keep wanting to come back and try the next tour, etc.
I don't want to hog all the panel all myself. Do any of you have questions that have popped up and you're curious about?
You said that your repeat customers, you give them like a product, right?
No, what I'm saying is the question is describing our products. Our products are these food tour experiences. They range from 2 to 3 hours long. So, for example, we have a Gold Coast and Old Town food tour, and this is only going to go through these 2 neighborhoods in Chicago. It's 3 hours long. That one's $45. But then we have a Chinatown food tour. So this one's about 3.5 hours. This one's $55. And so those are our products in our unique industry. Our products are these walking tours. The way we differentiate them is not just by price, but generally by area or by, in this case, even ethnic areas of the city. So we might have a Chinatown tour that's going to be focusing just on Chinese food, whereas our Bucktown Wicker Park food tour, that is going to focus on a variety of tastings across 6 different locations. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm curious, the weather being the way it is in Chicago, what months of the year do you operate?
Yeah, were you here for my first my first speech? We shut down. We're a seasonal food tour business. This is one of the reasons that it's a luxury for me, because one of my passions is to travel, and I get 3 months built in each year to leave, to re-energize, refocus, take exotic, interesting, crazy trips, because I've just enjoyed that. But then, for example, in New York City, a lot of the food tour owner operators, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, they operate year-round because you just have better weather programs and patterns, I should say. But anyone here that's ever been in Chicago in January, you do not want to be outside taking a food tour. So it's in our best interest to shut down. And that's also a personal choice. We could get a bus and do the same tours that we do now. It just takes away everything. It's completely different. If you're on a bike, if you're on a bus, if you're on a Segway, it's one thing. But if you're walking, you just experience the city completely differently.
Kristen, I'm just thinking of Cindy here, who does one of our tours, and I don't think we have a lot of food tours here in Rhode Island and Providence. And last year we heard from the 2 women who run a program in Ontario, which links different places so that you go on a self-guided tour. And do you see that as something possible for cities to do and convention bureaus?
Yeah, one of the things that we're really looking at, and I've had some initial meetings with our local Department of Environmental Management, is looking at local product and creating online self-guided tours, maybe starting at some of the wineries, going into Providence for some great food, going down, to the southern part of the state to learn about aquaculture. And so that's something where initially everyone's very excited about. No one has any money, but everyone is very excited about trying to one of the great things about living in Rhode Island, because it's so small, is you can really collaborate very easily. So that is kind of on tap, is to try to figure out a way to use online assets to really kind of develop things that highlight not only local restaurants, but what's really emerging is, what Lisa was talking about in that local food product and economic development merging into tourism.
Did we have?
I think. Do you see that there's a trend that seems to be coming out with the home-hosted meals, and people book a local, for instance, is one of those?
Yeah, I wouldn't look at that as a competitor per se, because for me, that's more they're helping me. Because if that person is doing that for the first time, I haven't necessarily done something like that. They're getting excited about food. And the more excited people get about food, I've always had a unique perspective on competition. I think that, first of all, it's healthy. I think it's expanding our industry. You just said that there was, in 2000, there's probably 2 food tours in New York City, and now there's dozens. But a lot of the times, your business continues to grow. And so when I see somebody doing, let's say, a stay-at-home dinner, first of all, that's probably in the evening, and my tours are during the day. So I've got that advantage. But also, and I've said this a lot at Food Tour Pros, and I'll say it here too, I think the food in a lot of ways, at least for the food tours, is secondary. These people just want to be entertained. That's been an understanding of mine for the last decade. They want to show up, they want to forget about their life, their kids, unless their kids are on the tour, and then it's our tour guide's problem. They want to forget about those things, and they just want to have fun. And they know they're going to have food. They expect food. They signed up for the food. What they didn't necessarily sign up for that I'm aware of is they want to have fun, and they want to be entertained. So this dinner may or may not be fun. It may or may not be entertaining. It might really just be about the food, and that's great. I think that's a completely different level of discussion. But I wouldn't necessarily look at that as food, because I think what we're doing is we're getting out in the neighborhoods. We're showcasing architecture, history, and architecture, like I said. And so it's kind of like 4 tours in one. But the focus is on let's have fun, let's laugh, and oh, by the way, at the end, you've had a big lunch and you absolutely loved all the food that you had. So that would be my perspective. I'd love to hear anybody else's.
I agree with you. I don't think it's a different type of experience. Someone who's choosing to go to at home is not choosing to walk with me in the Bronx. and it's totally different. One of the things that I do that is a little bit different from other tours is I go into neighborhoods where there are not food tours now, and the kind of food that I'm finding tends to be just different. It can be in one tour African to start with, and then Caribbean, and in the course of a day we might have 4 or 5 different cuisines, and we sometimes make bus connections between neighborhoods, but mostly we're walking, and it's really getting to places that people have heard about and they just don't know how to get there, and I do. And so I think it's complementary, but not competitive, and it's great that it's happening.
I'm going to disagree a little bit on here's a problem with the shared economy is taxation issues. When you probably agree with me because you're a civic organization as well. And it's a big struggle for groups like us because, it's great if you're going into a chef's home and cooking, but those people may have gone out to dinner and then they'd be paying restaurant taxes, which support our local economy. It's a big issue with Airbnb as well.
Yeah, the whole concept of an OTA or an online travel agency sort of began this cascade where organizations like ours, and I think you guys have a prepared food tax here or a restaurant tax? Yes. We do not have one. So our organization is funded by a portion of the occupancy tax that you pay when you stay in a hotel. So when you go to a hotel, if you are buying a room for $100, you're going to pay 7.5% sales tax, and then you're going to pay a 6% occupancy tax. Now, you would think, 6% on 7,600 hotel rooms, that must be a pretty flush organization. No, it's a 6% occupancy tax, of which, so that's 6 cents a dollar, we see 2 cents, okay? And then 1 cent goes to liquidate the debt on the Durham Performing Arts Center, which is our world-class theater, which is one of the busiest in the world. And then the remaining 3 cents, that gets split between the city and the county. So every time we see some organization come through that siphons off some of that revenue stream, that's of concern to us. Now, online travel agencies are in a fight with the state of North Carolina right now about whether or not they owe us back taxes. That's a different story. But we also don't have a restaurant or prepared food tax. What we do have is a very vigilant health department in North Carolina. So the shared economy, the idea of someone cooking in their home for a fee, yeah, that'll get shut down really, really quickly. We had a kid who actually at Duke University back in mid-2000s, his name was Brian Zupon, and he had a business out of his dorm called Z Kitchen. No joke, this kid was doing sous vide, he was doing super high-end cooking techniques, he was using great ingredients, and he was in the New York Times. And then he wasn't. So the idea of this shared economy is a cool idea, and as a chef, it's attractive to me, and as a former caterer, it's attractive to me. But as a DMO person, destination marketing organization person, I'm thinking, get out of the house, man. Go see the place, because you'll want to come back again and again. So we sort of have issues with it for slightly different reasons, but I love the idea of people feeling convivial about food because I'm passionate about a good meal and people sharing it. Professionally, right now, I would love for people to go to a restaurant and do it.
I have a question. I don't know. Does this work? Yeah. And thank you. I was going to talk about food safety. I was going to caution going to somebody's house for a meal. It's a little... We've got some pretty strong food safety requirements here in Rhode Island, so we're a little sensitive to that. Any direction going in vegan or vegetarian or more healthy direction for food tours?
I tell people, first of all, to let me know ahead of time if they have any food needs. I ask if they have food allergies before your tour starts. And there's enough flexibility, I'd say to all of my tours, that I can make them vegetarian. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to make them vegan, and I do have to let them know. I had someone who also wanted a gluten-free tour. So it's not always that easy, and if you're going to Latin American area where people are very beef-heavy, then we always look at the appetizers, because appetizers are often where you can find good vegetarian options. We can be flexible.
Yeah, I would say that I was a little progressive, and I would also say aggressive with our vendors. I noticed the trend was changing about, was it 7 or 8 years ago? This is a true story. The local news station was doing a story about Chicago Food Planet food tours. And I remember the lady at the end of the tour, she went up, he wasn't planted, he was just actually on the tour. He was a 9-year-old boy. And the producer of the show went up and tried to interview him on camera and said, you know, what was your favorite tasting? Was it the Chicago-style hot dog? And his response was, I'm a vegetarian. And I thought, he's 9 years old. So I could see that we were going in a direction where I needed to offer options. And so to her point, we have an option for everything. We actually have a list. It's this massive spreadsheet of every allergy, aversion, dietary preference known to man. Some of them aren't on the list because somebody randomly will say, you know, I can't eat tomatoes. It's a preference. Okay, well, this is tomato sauce. There's really not too much I can do about this on a Chicago-style pizza, for example. But if it's something that we can fix, we absolutely will change it. We have to. The problem we saw 9 or 10 years ago was the stores are like, what's a vegan? What's celiac? What does that mean? How do I change that? So we really pushed them and said, look, you shouldn't just do this for me. You should do this for yourselves. Your company, your business, whatever kind of food store that you have, you need to start offering these types of options. Because one of the things that I'm always stressing is if you don't offer a vegetarian, a vegan, a wheat-friendly, whatever it might be, you're losing business. Because those people tend to take tours in groups. And you can either have 4 people go into your restaurant, or you can have 0. And all because one of those 4 people is a vegan and you don't have vegan options. And I didn't want to have that happen, so we started offering options for all of our tours. Our vendors over the years have actually thanked me and said, you know, you really forced us to think about how we could provide options, and we're actually seeing our business grow because we're getting the group of 4 instead of absolutely nobody. So it's a really great question.
And if I would just add that we found that same thing happening at the school level, the student level. Not just in the area of allergies, but in preferences, lifestyle choices. The students are coming to us going, I want this, and this is the thing I want to learn how to cook. We just had Mark Ladner had his pasta flyer up here last weekend. Lena Kwok was here for Cup. Both of them are alum of ours, and the students respond to that right away. They look at that and they say, well, there's a business I can do, and that is something that we can be involved with. One of our largest clubs is now a Song Gluten group. The students from our nutrition program wind up working in research and development and developing, gluten-free donut holes for Dunkin' Donuts. So there is a tremendous amount of interest in wellness and how the intersection really of food and health that we're finding is really pushing us also more into the sciences than we've ever been before.
I'd like to add, and you probably have that experience also, that a lot of the ethnic foods, not all of them, but a lot of them are actually healthier in many ways because they use natural ingredients. It's just part of the culture than American cuisine. And I mean, it's something I've been looking at a lot, is also looking at how some of the ethnic cuisines have changed because of American influences. But I try in the neighborhoods, even some of the African foods, which are very, certain cassava leaf and certain types of rice and certain types of grains that people aren't used to. And just to let them know, if they try eating these other cuisines, they're actually eating better ingredients. It's the kids, when they grow up in this country who grew, children of immigrants, in this country, they get fat, and in their home cultures, it doesn't happen in the same way because they're not exposed to American junk food. My preaching for now.
Yes.
I have a question to Kristen and Sam. I'm from the Bahamas, and they have like a 4-person culinary tourism division. It's very sparsely resourced, and I'll save the sort of descriptive details, but basically they haven't done much in that area, and there's not a lot of widespread understanding throughout the Ministry of Tourism, which is the most highly funded ministry organization, that culinary tourism is important. And the Bahamas is losing market share every year to other Caribbean destinations that offer just as nice, or almost just as nice beaches, not as nice, but almost as nice beaches for lower prices and so on. So my question to you is sort of two things. First of all, about 65% to 70% of the visitors coming to the Bahamas, and it's increasing every year, on a cruise ship. They're only in Nassau in particular, they're there for between 5 and sometimes overnight, but basically 5 and 8 hours. So their average spend is a 20th of what a stayover visitor spends. So basically, sometimes they are very well educated and are absolutely to have a lot of money, but a lot of times they're the type of person who takes 20 cruises a year and is really not spending that much money the average spend is like $57 per person. So my first question is, do you think that, given that that's the kind of tourism landscape of the Bahamas at this time, culinary tourism can be as impactful as in a city, for instance, which has more of a, and by the way, locals don't tend to take tours in the Bahamas, so it's almost all tourism based. That it can be as effective with maybe a clientele that's not as affluent?
This is a very, very complicated question that you've asked, and that's a PhD thesis of a question, but let me try and break a few things down for you. From the standpoint of culinary tourism, I had the good fortune to meet with some people from the Ministry of Tourism for the Bahamas, Eddie and Brooke Simpson and a few other people who were from Grand Bahama about a month ago, and that's one of the things they wanted to talk about. Mostly they wanted to talk about this new flight from R to U, but we started talking about, what is it that people would travel for? And the subject of food was top of mind for them. So that's good news for you to sort of internalize, maybe, I hope. I think for what I heard you talking about from the standpoint of the limited interest in spending, your issue may not be organic to what's available in the market in terms of people being willing to or promote food tourism. You may want to work with the cruise ships to feed their customers less, because a lot of people probably get off the boat pretty full. But supply and demand. And if there's no demand for the supply that you have, you may sort of be suffering that. It's just a thought that came into my head, knowing people who take tours and they come back and talk about how much they ate on the boat. From the standpoint of promoting your local food tourism and your local product development, if you will, that has to come down to really just good old marketing savvy. And I don't know the landscape well enough to sort of give input on how to do that, how to create that, because every culture is different. But, I didn't suffer that problem in Durham. We don't suffer that problem in Durham because people are interested in them, and the people who were there sort of supplying it are doing it in a way that people are responding really well to.
I'll tackle the second half of your question because A, I think I can do that better, and B, it's something we've had a lot of experience in. So how we got buy-in is whenever you're doing destination marketing, you have to look at what you're better at than your competitors. So what we did is we looked at our competitive set, and one of the things that we're really strong in is culinary. So it was kind of easy to get the buy-in. And also the culture of this city. If you're traveling around here, you're going to notice there's not a lot of Burger Kings. You're not going to see any McDonald's. You'll see a Dunkin' Donuts every 5 feet, but that's a whole different story, and we don't have a lot of time for that today. But so you already had that buy-in. But here's a benefit that we're seeing that I didn't even think would be a benefit was a great deal of our business in Providence is meeting and convention based, and we're starting to get a lot of food-based meetings and conventions in. Next week we're hosting the American Association of Cereal Chemists, and what they do is they fortify grains, which is a whole subscience. So we have General Mills and Kellogg's and all these really cool people coming in. We're hosting the American Cheese Society this year or next year. We're hosting the Pangborn Society, which is a worldwide organization of people who look at the sense of taste and look at sensory science. So all of this stuff came because they knew Providence was a really good food city, and that's kind of was the genesis. So the thing that's really interesting about culinary tourism is it has effects that you might not even think of. So if you can show kind of ROI and be, and just say, look, we've got all of this, then it can be really powerful.
Yes. Hi.
My name is Mario. I'm the general manager of the Panelist Bakery, and I'll have the privilege of speaking tomorrow. But I've been listening in due respect to Durham. You folks run your tours in major cities compared to where our bakery is, and my colleagues, unfortunately she's not here, she stepped out for a second, who has her own food tour business on Cape Cod. You said build it and they will come as a suggestion. You said it was already there and we embellished basically. On the Cape, you have to have something to take people to. Otherwise you're going to be taken to a fried fish place. There are some great restaurants, one that we happen to operate, but that's few and far between. So it's the smaller towns, the grassroots, that are going to be difficult. In a major town, you're going to come across so many artisans, so many wonderful restaurants, and so many foodies. So it's there to build on. There's so many things we're talked about today, and I don't want to get into a tangent, but I did want to say that I think children is the target that tours should be focused on in somewhat, because by the time they're adults and can pay for this, these folks already know or should know, and it's too late to teach their children that. But, and we made comparisons between Europe and so on and so forth, and the reason is because children in Europe and other food-based countries or cuisine know how to eat already. It's in their DNA. We don't know how to eat. We forgot to teach our children how to eat. And I think that these food tours, matter of fact, even in reverse, to bring them to schools, to bring your people, your tours to a school and do this in schools, this kind of symposium would be really a bright future for the food industry. So, anyway.
To respond to a question that maybe you didn't ask, well, no, because I think what I heard you, sort of the subtext of one of the things you were talking about was inventory. You just don't feel like there's enough stuff to bring people to.
You can make it up, and it'll be just very challenging. Colleen is going to speak to that tomorrow in her business. She also happens to run our cafe for us, so she has, we have a full-time job, so does Colleen, to support her habit and her passion. Yeah, it's inventory in small towns, in places where, are not centers for culinary and, passion and quality.
So one of the things that we have in the Triangle area, and we work cooperatively, and Kristen can nod her head, we do something that's atypical in that we work across county lines with our colleagues in Raleigh and in Chapel Hill, Wake and Orange counties. We have a website that we produce called trianglegrown.com, which is all about our agritourism product. And we actually included 2 other counties that are close by. So sometimes it isn't so much that you don't that a place doesn't have enough inventory is that it isn't qualifying all the potential inventory as part of a food tour. We built trianglegrown.com cooperatively because together we had a very strong product, and we were watching the trends on agritourism kind of just break records. So, and I would bet money that out on the Cape, there's really strong agritourism, at least during the growing season. So there may be some ways to sort of provide people both the raw material and the end product to create truly engaging tours.
And we partner to that end. For example, we're a member-driven organization, which not all CVBs are, but we do. We have paying memberships. And we started noticing that we had a little chunk of memberships, restaurants in Bristol, which is about 25 minutes from here. And it's a smaller destination. It's just starting to grow a tourism product. There's like one hotel. So we've kind of worked with them so that people who are interested in food in Providence that we're an urban experience and maybe they want more of a coastal thing might take which in Rhode Island is a very long time, 25-minute ride, out to Bristol and check out some like-minded folks. So yeah, that's kind of how we try to support smaller towns.
I just want to address what you were saying because one of my biggest fears when I started Food Tour Pros was, there's only so many New York, LAs, and Chicago. After that, to me, everything is small to mid-sized cities. But the proof is in the pudding. Majority of our students are coming from small locations. Cape Cod is a small town. So on the one hand, you're saying that the resources, the quantity, and maybe even the quality is not there. But I have to just say that I'm not necessarily seeing that. I would say every day of the week I am surprised by somebody that submits a consultation with Food Tour Pros saying, look, I'm thinking of starting a food tour here. And I look it up on Google Maps because I have no idea where that place is. I think the proliferation of food tours, one of the things I always laugh about when people contact me from Europe, and we don't get a lot of students from the powerhouses, and I would say the powerhouses, where are they? Well, in Europe, for example, we look at Italian food, we look at Spanish food, we look at French food. I always say, if you go to India, do you know what they call Indian food? Food. And so if I have to teach people from India, which I've done, and France and Germany and Spain, how to run a successful food tour business, and the idea of American food is so distant to them, because if I ask those people why am I going to learn how to run a food tour from some guy in the United States, they're thinking that we have pizza and hot dogs, which, by the way, if you take a Chicago Food Planet tour, we do eat both of those. But my point is that if we can show, in a lot of ways, how to run a successful food tour, and we don't even have our own food groups here in Chicago, in the United States, it's amazing to me that more countries outside the United States aren't doing more food tours, especially for foreigners that are traveling there or Europeans traveling from one part of Europe to another part of Europe. I'm getting a little way off of your topic, but I will tell you that there are more and more olive oil and balsamic vinegar stores showing up in really small towns. There's tea stores that are showing up in really, really small towns. There's homemade chocolate stores showing up in really small towns. And so I hear what you're saying, but I am seeing something a little different. And I think it's something to be happy and excited and hopeful about, that we are seeing smaller towns. For example, Frederick, Maryland, which is here on the East Coast. I have a student from Frederick, Maryland. I went there, wasn't expecting much, blew me away. Just tea stores, homemade soda stores, a lot of different unique local establishments that are more than enough to create a food tour if you're looking to have like 6 or 7 tastings. So I see and acknowledge what you're saying, but there is good news. We're getting a little bit better at raising our kids and eating better, and it is going to take, I think, a food revolution. And I think we're all here today because we're going through it.
I would add that I just had a couple from Spain on a tour the other day, and they were telling me they found me somehow separately, but there are all kinds of partnerships that are done when people are coming from overseas. They get some sort of I think it was called a traveler's passport, and when they buy that, it can include a food tour and a sightseeing tour and something else. So one of the strategies with the smaller markets is to partner with other types of tours, and then people will buy that in a package. So I thought I'd mention that as one way to do it.
I think this panel has been amazing. I think we have all learned an awful lot. And I think when we come here next year and convene, I want to hear about the Vegemite tour. I don't know about the rest of you, but so it's time to start walking to the Dorrance. So thank you.